Chapter 21. Rock the Nation. ZO2 continued to build their residency on Monday nights at Arlene's Grocery into the happening place to be. It started to feel like my old crazy country club days with Playground. It started to become a thing. On March 8th, 2004, we had a release party for the debut album, Tuesdays and Thursdays, titled after the days of the week on which we rehearsed and wrote the album. Just a few short weeks later, I got an email that would change my life forever. On the morning of Monday, April 12th, 2004, I woke up like it was any other morning. Madeline had stayed over the night before and was getting ready to leave for work. I decided to check my emails on the computer while she was getting ready. I had an email from Lynn Lenway, Bob Held's wife, who sometimes helped out on day-to-day activities with the band. But by no means was she a co-manager at this point. The email was addressed to me, Paulie, and Dave. It went something like this. Hey guys, it's Lynn. I wanted to see what you were doing this summer. I hope you all aren't too busy because ZO2 just got 40 dates opening for Kiss on their summer tour. I had to read it a few times to even grasp the concept of what it said. I would not let myself get too excited until I understood more. I called Madeline over to read it, and she didn't seem that excited. In her defense, we had only been dating for about 10 months, and this email said that I would be going away on tour for 3 straight months. After her initial skepticism, she cheered up a little bit. I still didn't. Then I told my mom, who was making us all breakfast, what the email said, and she freaked out. My mom had really understood what this could mean to me. It was basically my dream come true. Next to actually being the drummer in Kiss, this was the ultimate for me. Even though Madeline and I were already deeply in love in under a year, she couldn't understand all the work, practice, blood, sweat, and tears that I'd put into my drums. She didn't understand how big Kiss was to me. But my mom was there from the beginning. She was there at Madison Square Garden in 1979 when I first saw Kiss. She was there when I bought my first Kiss album. And she was there through all the months and years of me practicing my drums to Kiss albums. She was the one who gave up her bedroom after we lost our first house so I could have a place to practice and someday fulfill my dreams. That day had finally come. Even though I stopped myself from 100% celebrating yet, I saw tears well up in my mother's eyes. The sight of her with tears of joy and pride for her baby boy made me happier than the actual news of getting the Kiss tour. I'd always known that family was the most important thing, but that day reassured me that without family and someone to share your dreams with, your dreams would be empty. I called Bob right away to confirm that this email wasn't some kind of sick, twisted joke. He immediately confirmed and told me how such a thing had transpired. As mentioned, Bob was pretty close friends with Paul Stanley. Bob always told us stories about how he got an old band he used to manage called 40-Foot Ringo a few gigs opening for Kiss. I'm not sure I ever truly believed him. Apparently, after we finished our album, Bob had sent Paul Stanley a copy to not only listen to, but to also put it in his head that if Kiss ever needed anyone for a one-off gig, to give ZO2 a call and they wouldn't disappoint. Kiss was already scheduled to kick off their summer 2004 Rock the Nation tour with Poison as the opening act. A few different rumors also had former Motley Crue bassist Nikki Sixx's band, Brides of Destruction, as the third band on the bill. Something happened that either caused Brides to be fired or they pulled out of the tour last minute at the beginning of April. Rumors were going around that it was because Nikki Sixx refused to tour in the opening slot in front of Poison. Others say it was because Kiss fired them due to drug use. It didn't really matter. All that mattered was Kiss had a last-minute opening slot on their upcoming tour, and Paul Stanley gave our manager a call and asked him if ZO2 wanted it. It was absolutely amazing to consider the different set of circumstances that had led to this exact event. All the hard work throughout the years burned me out at one point during the Valentine Smith years. Then, I decided to enjoy playing my drums again, which led me to Kiss Nation, which ultimately led me to ZO2, and straight back to Kiss. It's funny how everything always came back to Kiss. Even the disaster with Seven Wiser turned out to be a blessing in disguise. If Sandy wasn't such a douchebag, I probably would have stayed with them and then possibly missed out on this Kiss tour. I never give Paulie and Dave enough credit. They had a vision to make a full-length album and finance it themselves. They were set on not waiting for things to come to them and doing it ourselves. I was absolutely against it at the time. The circumstances that led ZO2 to make that album now had brought us to this moment, the Kiss Tour. Without that album and without Bob getting it to Paul Stanley, none of this would be happening. I always give credit where credit is due. Paulie and Dave deserve a lot of credit for funding that whole album, which wound up costing upwards of $30,000. And I also give major credit to Bob Held. His contacts and him pushing us to do a full-length album got us this Kiss tour. Now, it was time to make the most of it. The Rock the Nation tour was set to begin on June 10th, 2004, which gave us less than 2 months to figure out how the hell we were going to pull off this monumental task. Believe it or not, Paulie and I were still gigging with Kiss Nation during this time, but we knew once we got the Kiss tour, we couldn't do it anymore. We broke the news to Carlos and Ruby and finished up the last few shows we had already scheduled. It was bittersweet. It was amazing knowing that ZO2 was going to the next level and going on tour with Kiss, but in a strange way, I was going to miss my time in Kiss Nation. The only small disappointment was that the tour wouldn't include original Kiss members, Ace Frehley, and especially for me, Peter Criss. They had both recently been replaced by Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer. I was still thrilled beyond belief, but having my idol Peter Criss on that tour would have really been the cherry on the top. It was unheard of for an unsigned band like ZO2 to be on tour with a major act like Kiss. We had no label behind us for tour support money, and we had never done a major tour before. We didn't know all of the logistics that went into it, but we were soon to get a crash course. Once the tour was confirmed, Bob's wife, Lynn, came on board officially as a co-manager. This was totally okay with us. Lynn had worked in the record industry for years and even spent a few years working directly for Kiss. She would be the person to start spearheading all of the things that needed to get done before the tour started. The first thing we had to figure out was transportation. Luckily, Kiss's road crew was going to be transporting all of our gear from show to show. That was one major obstacle out of the way. Now we just had to figure out how the band, Bob, a tech, and the Z's little brother Brian, who was coming along to film and document the entire tour, were going to travel across country for the next 3.5 months. We knew right away that a tour bus was completely out of the question due to financial reasons. Paulie, Dave, and Bob decided to rent a large SUV Ford Explorer with a third row of seats in the back. It was going to be a miserable summer with 6 people and luggage traveling almost 20,000 miles in that. Or at least that was until I found the answer to our prayers one night when I was at Madeline's brother Joe's house in Staten Island. Parked in front of his house was an old RV camper. A light bulb immediately went off in my head. That was exactly what we needed. I started to research what an RV would cost to rent for the summer. It turned out that because traveling across country was what an RV was intended for, it was only a little bit more expensive than renting the Explorer. In the long run, it would actually save us money. We would now be able to skimp on many of the hotel rooms we were planning to rent and just sleep in the RV. Another luxury was that we would also be able to bring an extra person to help with the driving. Because Paulie and Dave were already bringing their brother Brian, and their old friend Paul LaPlaca was coming on board as a tech, they asked me to pick who could come and help out with the driving. Of course, the first person that came to mind was my lifelong buddy, Rob Scally. Scally had been there for every band I'd ever been in. He had been there to buy Kiss albums with me and to see Kiss time and time again. I couldn't think of anyone better to bring along to share this amazing experience with. I called Scally excitingly to not only tell him the news about the Kiss tour, but to ask him to come along. He was excited beyond belief and knew that this was a dream come true for me. Unfortunately, he couldn't come on this once-in-a-lifetime experience because he had just recently become a firefighter and there was no way to take off for 3.5 months. He was crushed that he couldn't be there with me, but we both understood. In hindsight, it was probably much better that Scally didn't come. He and I would have gotten into way too much trouble. I had to figure out someone to bring who would not only be responsible, but also was available for the entire summer. I then thought of the perfect person. Another lifelong friend who had just gotten laid off from his job, was responsible, and didn't drink and party enough to get me into trouble. I called Anthony Muscarella, whom we all called Musk. Musk would eventually be a jack of all trades for us on this tour, driver and security guard, offering help to break down gear. Whatever we needed him to do, he was ready to help out. Most of all, Musk brought me a slice of sanity while I was out on the tour that summer. Like I mentioned, Paulie and Dave were very different from me. Whenever they drove me crazy on tour, I would grab Musk and we would hang out, either playing wiffle ball or just exploring the arenas. We were now almost set to hit the road. It would be me, Paulie, Dave, Bob, Brian Z, Paul LaPlaca, and Musk. The next step was to try and find some endorsements for gear and to try to get some kind of a sponsorship for the tour to help us offset some of the costs. The next 2 weeks consisted of making non-stop phone calls. Everyone was in charge of trying to get their own music gear endorsements, and then we all had delegated other tasks to carry out. Since I found the RV, I was in charge of trying to find a company that wanted to put its logo on it as advertising to help sponsor the tour. Tour buses and even local city buses had mesh bus wraps that companies paid to wrap the entire bus in as a huge advertisement. We thought we could get someone to do the same for the RV. Musk and I would spend the next few weeks trying to get it all done, but to no avail. Next, I would try to find a drum company that would endorse me for the tour. My first call was to my dream company, Ludwig. Ludwig was a brand I'd always wanted to play. All of my drum heroes played Ludwig, including Eric Carr. I cold called Ludwig one afternoon and asked to speak to the artist development department. As luck would have it, they connected me to the head of artist development, Todd Trent. I went into detail to explain who I was and what I was about to embark on, a tour with Kiss. Todd seemed interested and asked me what I needed and that he'd love to help me out. At the time, I was really looking for something to help me stand out while I was on stage. I knew I was only going to be traveling with a small 4-piece kit, but I wanted something different. I remember seeing a recent picture of Tommy Lee of Motley Crue and his drum kit. He had an enormous bass drum that I just thought looked incredible. I had no idea what size it was, but I described this to Todd, and he understood right away what I was thinking. Todd said that they didn't have anything like that in stock as a loaner, and because we were on such a time constraint, he said that it would be impossible to make something like that so quick. He offered me a basic kit to use for the tour, but I stupidly declined. I figured I already had a basic kit and I didn't need one from Ludwig. Dumb. A few weeks before we would be leaving for tour, Madeline surprised me with a trip to Mexico to celebrate. It was amazing. I knew she was a little worried about me going on tour, but I knew that she was the one for me and I would never do anything to jeopardize that. The day before we left for Mexico, Bob informed us that we had a new show booked at the Funky Monkey in Long Island. I told Bob that the new show conflicted with my trip to Mexico. Shockingly, he asked me to get back a few days early so I could make the show. I actually laughed out loud at this obscene request. Of course, Paulie and Dave agreed with Bob that I should come back early. I said, "Do you hear what you're actually asking me to do? You want me to change my trip, my flights, and leave my vacation early just to come back and play a no-name dump of a club out in Long Island that was booked after I already had plans." This was the first time, and unfortunately not the last, that Bob would attempt to interfere in my personal life. If ZO2 didn't have the Kiss tour coming up in just a few weeks, I would have told Bob and the guys absolutely not. Since I didn't want to ruffle any feathers right before spending 3 months with these guys, I gave them an option I was sure they would turn down. I told them that it was going to cost me almost $500 to switch my flights on such short notice. I knew the gig in Long Island was only paying us maybe $200 tops, so there was no way they were going to agree. Sure enough, Bob said that it was worth it to pay the extra so we could do the gig. I thought, of course he said yes. He was going to make Paulie and Dave, and ultimately me down the road, pay for it. Bob was extremely generous with other people's money. The Kiss Poison ZO2 Rock the Nation tour would start in San Antonio, Texas on June 10th, 2004. We would all meet at Paulie's apartment in Brooklyn to load the RV. We were all so excited loading the RV with snacks, drinks, pillows, and blankets, and we even figured out a way to rig a small TV and a DVD player to the sink. We knew this was going to be basically our home for the next 3 months, and we wanted to make sure that we had everything we needed. Even though I was about to embark on an experience of a lifetime, I was still slightly hesitant to get too overcome with joy. It all still felt a little too good to be true. There was always something in the back of my head that thought when we arrived in Texas for the first show, they either wouldn't know who the hell we were, or we would be playing as a side act in the parking lot or something. Until I was on that stage, Kiss's stage, hitting the first note to our intro, I wasn't going to fully believe it was happening. The plan was to leave 3 days before the first show. Texas was about 1,500 miles from Brooklyn, and we planned on stopping 2 nights at hotels. We were so pumped and excited to get there that we wound up driving for the next 35 hours straight, only stopping to eat and pee. I'm the type of person who never gets nervous before a big event or a big gig, mostly because I know before I ever do the gig that I am uber prepared. I always thought it was silly to be nervous if you were ready and happy to be there. Excited? Yes. Nervous? Never. But this event was different. Not because it was the biggest thing I'd ever done, but because all of the unknowns. And this time, I was nervous. Not to play in front of 20,000 people or to meet my idols. I was nervous that I would be disappointed that all of this would somehow not happen. On the day before the first show, I was still a little unsure of what kind of greeting and reception we would get. Would they even be expecting us? If they did, would they welcome us? How would the guys in Poison and Kiss feel about having some young unknown band on tour with them? There were just so many questions going into that first day. It was pretty overwhelming. But the biggest question still was, is this really happening? On the morning of June 10th, we arrived at the Verizon Wireless Amphitheater around 9 a.m., which was 3 hours before our call time. We wanted to get there early to assess the surroundings and figure out what the procedure was going to be every day. I'm sure I was the only one still questioning if we were really going to be opening for Kiss later that night. Once we arrived, we were greeted by Patrick Whitley, the production manager. Patrick was a dry Englishman that was, in all honesty, a little scary. Not physically scary, but scary in the fact that he really held ZO2's fate in his hands. Bob, Paulie, Dave, and I walked up to him to introduce ourselves. I had a lump in my throat. This was the telltale moment. If he was expecting us, then all was okay. If he wasn't, then this might be the moment my dreams were crushed. Bob politely said, "Hello, sir. ZO2 reporting for duty." Patrick paused and gave us all a look over and said, "Who?" My heart sank. I thought to myself, oh no, how could this be happening? He had no idea who we even were. Patrick looked up and said, "Just kidding, fellas. Good to see you." I'm not sure there had ever been a greater sounding sentence in the history of the world. He then said, "Let me show you guys the stage." Patrick then passed us off to one of the stage managers, Mike. I think we used to call him Spragu or Spragu. I don't remember exactly. He brought us out to the center of the stage and began to show us exactly where our gear would be every night. I didn't really hear much of what he was saying. All I could see was the massive arena and the thousands of seats as I looked from center stage. Then I turned around and saw the enormous Kiss logo and Kiss's gear all set up right behind me. I just couldn't believe I would be playing in front of that every night. While Spragu was showing us around, a familiar face came over and introduced himself. He was wearing tight blue jeans, a bandana, and a cowboy hat. Yup, you guessed it, Bret Michaels from Poison. He said, "What's up, guys? I'm Bret. Welcome on board." He was as sweet and welcoming as could be. If Bret knew who we were and was greeting us, I guess it was official. I could finally start to breathe a little. This was really happening. Next, it was time to go backstage and see what it was like. In all the years of me being a huge music fan, I had never been backstage at a concert. It wasn't like it is today with bands offering meet and greets and special backstage tours. When I was growing up, backstage always meant party. The first stop backstage was catering. Paulie and Dave didn't drink at all, so the one thing that we all had in common and could enjoy together was eating like animals. After we filled our plates with as much food as humanly possible, I heard a familiar voice. Standing 2 feet away from us were Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. Paul and Bob immediately exchanged some pleasantries. Then Bob called us over so we could meet. Paulie and I had already met them when we filmed Mock Rock for VH1, but we had our Kiss makeup on back then. So I'm pretty sure that Gene and Paul never even realized it was us from Kiss Nation. Not that we were embarrassed by it or anything, but we just never even brought it up to them. Paul seemed friendly enough, giving us all a fist bump. He didn't really like to shake hands because he was a bit of a germaphobe. Gene, on the other hand, couldn't have been friendlier. He immediately said, "Stand back a little. Let me take a look at you boys." He then pointed at Dave and me and said, "These two look like rock stars. This one," pointing at Paulie, "looks like he should be in college." That's my Gene interpretation. Take it for what it is. We all erupted in laughter, except for poor Paulie, who was completely crushed. Just like Eric Singer had done to him in Puerto Rico, Gene destroyed him on the very first day of the tour. Once we finished with all of our hellos, it was time to load onto the stage. Once the three of us set up, It was time to get a line check. I'll never forget the first time I hit my bass drum that sunny afternoon in San Antonio. It was the greatest, most powerful thing I've ever heard. Growing up, whenever I went to an arena to see a band, the first thing I always noticed was how massive the drum sounded. Now it was my turn. My turn to have some kid in the audience notice how powerful and explosive my drums sounded. I was ready. Minutes before showtime, we gathered backstage to tell each other to kick ass and have fun. We put our fists in, looked each other in the eye, and knew we were about to do something special. Before leaving for tour, people warned us about the Kiss crowd. I also knew firsthand, having seen them a dozen times, that the Kiss crowd wasn't very receptive to the opening band. They wanted Kiss, and they didn't want to hear or see anyone else. Even the crew had told us to not get discouraged if the crowd booed or didn't respond positively. It didn't matter to me. We were about to hit the stage in front of 12,000 people and open for Kiss. Everything I'd worked for in my entire life led me to this exact spot. I was going to enjoy it no matter what. As we walked out onto the stage, people were still filing into the arena. Most didn't even know there was a third band on the bill. They thought it was just Poison and Kiss. We went out there to make sure they never forgot us. Paulie and Dave turned toward me to signal for the first downbeat of our intro. We hit that massive first chord, and it felt like the world shook. The crowd was skeptical, but began to take notice during our opening song, Taking Me Down. I could see people's heads starting to bop during our second song, Living Now. And by the time we hit our ballad, Dirty Water, I could see the people in the audience focused on the stage and enjoying what they heard. We were quickly approaching our finishing number, Fly on Your Wings, and I didn't want the night to end. It was all going by way too fast. I almost expected to have a frozen moment, but this was the one time that my adrenaline and sheer joy and happiness overwhelmed me so much that I was finding it hard to focus and slow things down. During the rumble of our last song, Paulie began to talk to the audience. He thanked them for being there and told them that we would be out by the merch booth selling CDs and t-shirts if anyone wanted to come by and say hello. As the low rumble Dave and I were creating began to slowly build, Paulie asked the crowd, "Are you ready?" The crowd gave a little cheer. He asked again, "Are you ready for a party tonight?" The crowd responded a little more. Paulie knew he had them and asked, then, "Where's the party tonight?" He answered his own question with the scream, "It's here! It's here!" As his words became more powerful, Dave and I got more powerful. And as the three of us were pouring every ounce of energy we had into that build, the audience became more energized and started to rise. Right at the moment when we finally reached our peak together, the song kicked in and the crowd exploded. For the next 4.5 minutes, the crowd was on their feet and sent us off the stage to a standing ovation and loud roar.
You know what that is? Are you feeling that? Right here? That's a pulse, baby. That's a beat, man! We call that rock and roll. You know a little bit about that, right? On the drums, Joey Cassata. On the bass guitar, and the official sponsor of the ab roller, my brother, David Z. My name is Paulie Z with ZO2. I gotta tell you, it is a pleasure. That's right. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with Kiss and Poison. This is a dream come true, and I know it is for you too. But I gotta tell you, the best part about being here is seeing you guys here early. That's right. You didn't have to come. You could have watched another episode of your favorite show, right? You could have stayed around, made a burger or two, but you came here early. You know why? I say you know why! Cause you know what time the party starts. And it's right now. Where is it? It's here. It's here. You're here. We're here. Let me hear. Let me hear. Let me hear. Come on. Let me hear. 1, 2, 1, 2, salvation was your creation. You hold the word in front. Yeah, use your confession for your obsession and hide behind the oppression. Oh, loyalty drifting, it is unspoken. What was the vow that was broken? Yeah, you want the world to see. You hold the rosary, closer than it's supposed to be. You're fighting for that thing that's inside. yearning for the one forbidden holiest of sinners, all that beginners, and themselves to be the winner. Now your genuflection has no direction. Tell me where's the connection? Yeah, I've come into your life. It's on the second bite. And decided for yourself what's right. See you smile at that dashboard idol that is looking at you, looking at you. See you praying, but what you really saying is getting right through. It's just something that you do. So fly on your wings again. Fly so high. I said put your hands up! Come on! What are you waiting for? Too high! Put 'em up! Fly so high! Too high! Here we go! Thank you very much! Come on, get up! Get the hell up! Get up! Get up! It's a rock and roll concert, man! Get up, we'll see! We'll see you too! We love you! Good night!
We had done it. Not only had I just lived my dreams opening for Kiss, but we actually won the crowd over and kicked ass. We erupted when we all met backstage. High fives, hugs, and tears of joy were flying everywhere. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of energy, excitement, or adrenaline in my life. This would go down as the all-time #1 greatest show I'd ever played in the history of my career. I don't believe it could ever be or will ever be topped. We all did it together. And right here in the pages of this book, I want to formally thank Paulie, Dave, Bob, and Lynn for helping make my dreams come true. I'll never forget it. Thank you. We were still flying high and celebrating when we realized that the night had just begun. We had to rush to pack our gear so we could get out to the merchandise stand to meet the crowd and hopefully sell a few CDs and t-shirts. Once we were done packing our gear, we raced up to the merch stand where they told us that they would be selling our stuff. When we got there, we weren't expecting to see what was in front of our eyes. Not only did we have a huge crowd of people waiting for us, but our merch was side by side with Kisses and Poisons. It was surreal. It was a surreal moment to see my face on a t-shirt being sold right next to a Kiss t-shirt. Wow. When the crowd of people surrounding the merch stand finally saw us approaching, we were bombarded. I don't think the three of us were expecting such a wild reception. Everyone wanted a piece of us, either an autograph, a picture, or just to chat with us and tell us how much they enjoyed the show. After about 20 minutes of being mobbed, as I was signing someone's CD, another person shouted, "Where can I get that CD?" I pointed and replied, "Right over there at the merch stand." He shouted back, "They just told me they were sold out." I was taken aback by that. We were sold out already? I thought to myself excitedly. We could hear Poison playing in the background while we were finishing up with our autographs and talking with everyone. Once the crowd began to wind down, we decided we wanted to run to see some of Poison's set. Just like when I was a kid and ran everywhere, we did it again. We ran all the way from the merch stand to the front row. The other audience members didn't mind at all that we were there. In fact, they loved it. We were greeted like rock stars. So much so that it became a little awkward because Poison was on stage performing and we were getting so much attention in the front row. We had to tell people to stop and watch the show. Brett saw us right away and gave us a little head nod as if to say, "Good job, boys." Guitarist CeCe DeVille and drummer Ricky Rocket did the same. We only got to enjoy the last two songs of Poison's set due to all the time we spent at the merch stand. As soon as Poison said goodnight, we were once again bombarded with fans from all sides. The merch booth a few minutes earlier was one thing, but this was really nuts. Everyone was surrounding us and wanting to talk to us. It was insane and amazing at the same time. We still hadn't eaten anything since lunch at around 1 p.m., and we decided if we wanted to watch Kiss, and of course we did, we would have to go eat fast. Our plan was then to come right back to the front row and watch our idols tear up the stage. I had never seen Kiss from the front row, and I wasn't going to miss this opportunity to see them on the first night of our tour. We told all of the fans around us that we'd be back out for Kiss and then to meet us at the merch booth after Kiss finished. Paulie, Dave, and I went backstage to scarf down some food as quickly as possible. We were all still on such a high, it was incredible. We told Bob about selling out the CDs at the merch stand and suggested that he try to get more over there because we planned on heading back after we watched Kiss. He said, "I'm on it," and ran off to see what he could do. Bob seemed just as excited as we were. He knew big things were about to happen, and he was acting like a little kid too. We were all giddy with the events of the day so far. As we were finishing our last bite of food, we started to hear a deep humming noise coming from the stage. We knew it was time. Once again, we raced to the front of the stage. There was a large black curtain now hanging in front. As the hum grew louder, a familiar voice began to shout. The arena erupted, and so did we. As soon as that curtain dropped, I was no longer Joey, the drummer of ZO2, that had just played the stage in front of me. I was the 5-year-old boy who was eating his hot dog in Madison Square Garden 25 years earlier. Gene immediately acknowledged us in the front row and began pointing at us and doing a little dance. I'm not sure, but I think he was making fun of Dave's stage dance moves. Paul Stanley then pranced his way over and gave us a cool thumbs up, signaling what he thought of our show. Holy shit, I thought. I'm watching Kiss from the front row, and Gene and Paul both personally gestured to us what a great job they thought we did. My 5-year-old self would have fainted. Kiss blasted through an hour and a half of absolute classics. The plan was to watch the show from the front row until the beginning of the last song, which we all knew would be rock and roll all night. Right before they began the last song, we would start heading back towards the sound man so we could beat the crowd to the merch booth when Kiss finally said goodnight. As we walked back, I drifted away a little and decided to watch Rock and Roll All Night by myself. I wanted to breathe for a second and reflect on this incredible day. I drifted away and found myself looking up into the night sky. This is the exact moment that this book began. This was my frozen moment at the greatest show of my life. It was a moment solidified in time, and one that I will never forget. When I finally snapped back into real time, I knew I had to get to the merch stand to see if we could meet with another rush of people on their way out of the arena. The strategy worked perfectly, and we were once again met with a mob of people waiting for us. The first day of the Kiss tour worked out so perfectly that we decided to do this exact routine every night for the whole tour. It was the start of one wild and amazing summer. If possible, the next night in Dallas was even better. Gone were all the doubts about being part of the tour. We arrived in Dallas ready to conquer, not hoping to be accepted. The capacity crowd was even more receptive than the night before. All 11,000 fans were on their feet during our last song, Fly on Your Wings. The first night wasn't a fluke. The Kiss crowd was not only accepting us, they were loving us. We were once again bombarded by fans when we went down to the front row to watch Poison. T-shirts and CDs were sold out before Kiss ever finished playing, and we once again finished the night watching our idols kick ass on stage. After the show and another trip to the merch stand to meet fans, Bob brought us into Kiss's hospitality suite. This was basically where Kiss could have dinner and relax if they didn't feel like eating and catering with everyone else. There was steak, chicken, fish, and about a half a dozen different types of desserts. We were in heaven. There was nothing better than celebrating a long, amazing show with a big meal. As we started to eat, Kiss's road crew began coming in and out to shower and also pick on Kiss's leftovers. I guess this was a regular routine for them. Each guy was nicer than the next, and we really bonded with the road crew that night. Everyone was so friendly and nice, until we met Gene's roadie, Spike. Spike was as uptight and miserable a person I'd ever met in my life. We asked what was wrong and why he was so down. He explained, "Because my boss is an asshole, that's why." He began telling us horror stories about how Gene would spit on him, scream at him, and even kick him during the show. We couldn't believe it. Gene, so far to us, seemed like a real sweetheart. After Spike's horror stories, he went into the bathroom to take a shower. We all agreed that we had to find a way to cheer Spike up when he returned. Once Spike was finished with his shower, we began talking to him again about the other stuff he did on the road. He informed us that he was actually the voice behind Kiss's famous intro, "You wanted the best, you got the best." He'd been doing it since the reunion tour in 1996. That was the opening we needed. We got down on our hands and knees and started bowing to him, a la Wayne's World, and chanted, "We're not worthy! We're not worthy!" He finally cracked a smile. Before too long, we had him teaching us how to properly deliver those magical words. That was just who we were, bright-eyed kids enjoying life. I think our youthfulness and happiness was infectious to anyone that came across our path that summer, Spike included. We received some much-deserving news while we were on our way to our next stop. Seven Wiser, the band with which I had a falling out, had been dropped by Wind Up Records a week after their album was released. It turned out that they just couldn't work with that asshole manager Sandy anymore and decided it wasn't worth dealing with them. I did feel badly for the few guys in the band that I got along with, like Joe Bell and Tudor, but hearing that Sandy was the cause of them being dropped made me so happy. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Karma's a bitch, dude. The next 3 stops were Houston, Denver, and Albuquerque. Musk and I were in charge of driving the night shift from about 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. Musk would drive, and I would be in charge of the map. Remember, this was before GPS. We needed a giant map open at all times so we could follow the highways across the country. Musk and I drove the other guys crazy by blasting 80s pop music all night and singing along at the top of our lungs to songs like Culture Club's Karma Chameleon or Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun. This drove Bob absolutely mad all summer. It was before the Houston show that we got to see Kiss soundcheck for the very first time. This was something I'd always wanted to experience, and it definitely didn't disappoint. We were the only ones watching, and Kiss noticed. Paul would shout out to us, "What do you guys want to hear?" We yelled back the obscurest songs possible, and they would actually attempt playing them. I think I shouted, "The Oath!" It was like our own private Kiss concert, and they were taking requests. In a way, this was even more enjoyable than watching them from the front row every night. This private show was quickly added to our daily routine. Denver and Albuquerque were more of the same. Pure ecstasy every day and night. Every moment was a dream come true. To add to my fantasy, we had lunch with Gene Simmons in New Mexico. It wasn't planned or anything. We were just sitting down and catering, and Gene walked in and sat with us. He began telling us, you guys are doing a fabulous job so far." We, of course, thanked him and then gave him a copy of our CD, and he immediately loved the cover. We told him that we were selling out every night, and he was really impressed. He gladly took the CD and began talking to us about the music industry. Gene was extremely smart and very intellectual, but he also had a skewed view on things. It was my first real experience having a long conversation with someone rich and famous, and it was very enlightening. As down-to-earth as he was, he just didn't think like the everyday person. He couldn't or shouldn't. He'd been rich and famous since he was in his early 20s, for about 30 years at this point. He was constantly surrounded by people that would yes him to death, which is why he was in shock when we started to debate and disagree with him on some issues. Not only was he in shock, but I could see he was enjoying it. A man like Gene wanted to debate. If you said the sky was blue, Gene would say, "Well, actually, the sky is black and the atmosphere just makes it look blue." This turned out to be another thing that we would add to our daily routine: lunch and debate hour with Gene Simmons. We really had an unbelievable schedule that we were starting to build up. Here's a quick rundown of a typical day with ZO2 on the Kiss tour. 8 a.m., arrive at the city in which we played that night. 9 a.m., eat breakfast at the local Denny's or Waffle House. 12 p.m., arrive at the venue. Check catering to see what's for lunch. Usually hang with Gene for a little while and debate about something. 2 p.m., play a little wiffle ball or football in the parking lot. Sometimes just throw the football with Brett. 3 p.m., start unpacking all the gear and getting it ready for stage. 4 p.m., watch Kiss do sound check. 5:30 p.m., do the ZO2 sound check. 6 p.m., pack up our dinner for catering to eat after the show. 6:30 p.m. Get dressed and ready. 7 to 7:30 p.m. Showtime. 7:45, pack up our gear. 8:15, scarf down some dinner as fast as we can. 8:45, watch the end of Poison set from the front row. 9 to 9:30, ZO2 meet and greet at the merch stand. 9:31, run to see Kiss as fast as we can to the front row. 10:45, watch the end of the Kiss set near the sound man. 10:55 to 12:30, ZO2 meet and greet at the merch stand. 12:30 a.m., look for scraps at catering to bring to the RV. 1 a.m., begin traveling to the next city. 2 to 7 a.m., switch drivers on and off. Try to sleep a few hours in between shifts. 8 a.m., start all over again.